Did you know that Fenty Beauty made around $100 million in sales in its first 40 days? Welcome to the Cosmetic Chronicles, the podcast where history meets beauty and tells the amazing stories behind some of the world's most notorious brands. I'm your host, Sarah Carvalho, and I'm a beauty journalist who has been obsessed with makeup since my first swipe of mascara. In this episode, we're covering Fenty Beauty, the groundbreaking beauty brand that was started by global superstar Rihanna. Now, for me, I remember when this launched, it was, as we'll get into, a very big deal. But I don't think I actually tried anything from the brand until 2020. I started buying a lot of makeup during COVID, and that led to an explosion of product. The first thing I actually tried was the cream bronzer. And I remember watching a few YouTube reviews, and they talked about how incredible it was to see a wide range of bronzers. Now, I knew the foundation was very popular immediately because of the shade range, but the bronzers, I don't want to let those go without being commented on either, because the bronzers also had a really beautiful shade range as well. And I think I've mentioned a few times on this podcast that I think that finding your bronzer shade can be almost as difficult as finding your foundation shade, because it's so hard to find something that doesn't just look like orange or red, or is even deep enough to be a bronze on you. So for her to be able to come out with a very nuanced shade range of bronzer, and by nuanced, I mean every other shade would be a different undertone. So it would be light cool and then light warm and then, light medium cool, light medium warm. So they would go cool to warm as it went up in shade range, or deeper in shade range, I mean. That was just a really cool launch. And so I got a cream bronzer that actually made me look bronze and not orange. And that was incredible. And I also got one of the blushes in Rose Latte. Both of them I used up. I absolutely adored them. And I've been wanting to try more products from them. So when a listener asked for me to do a Fenty episode, I was like, what a perfect excuse to get to learn more about the brand, but also get to try a bunch of products. So thank you for requesting this. And I do want to shout out the brand specifically because they were kind enough to send me a few of those iconic products that we'll talk about. I bought a few as well so I could play around with a few different formulas and things. But thank you so much to Fenty for being so kind and sending me those products. I cannot wait to play with them. If you're not following me over on Instagram, the link to my Instagram is in the show notes. I am over there at Glow and Flow by Sarah. I'll be doing a few reels with these products, like a full face, some side-by-side tests. I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. I can't wait. So definitely go over there and check it out. And thank you so much again to the brand for sending me those products. I really appreciate it. And we'll obviously talk more about all of the products later on in the episode and throughout, truly. But for now, let's actually go back to the beginning. So you might be wondering, why a deep dive on a brand that's still relatively new? While the brand is still under 10 years old, it has already made plenty of history. But in order to understand why, we do need to back up a little bit to what the makeup industry was looking like before 2017. So before Fenty launched, the prestige beauty industry looked very different than it does today. So to all my young listeners, gather around. Auntie Sarah is going to tell you about the before times. So even more so than today, foundation shade ranges were noticeably narrow, particularly at the deeper end of the spectrum. And many major brands treated inclusive shade development as either an afterthought or as a niche offering rather than a baseline expectation. So at the time, it wasn't uncommon for complexion launches to debut with fewer than 15 shades. And that might sound like a lot, but 15 shades where 5 of them could match me is not a shade range. That is not a shade range to be had. It was often concentrated around the light to medium skin tones, and they sometimes would launch and say, we're going to expand later. We'll have a few deeper shades later on. And what that did is it told consumers with deeper skin tones that they didn't matter, that they weren't worth the investment. they weren't worth the time and effort it could take to make products that could match their skin tone. And so consumers that had deeper skin tones or even olive complexion, they were frequently mixing their own products, trying to become chemists to try and figure out how to find a foundation shade, or they had to turn to professional, at the time, more professional only makeup brands. So I do know MAC had a nice wide range of foundations and makeup forever before this time, but they're not cheap. They're not always accessible. And they did kind of lean more towards people that were professional makeup artists. It was, if you just wanted a foundation to wear every day, maybe MAC wasn't what you were looking for, but it was all you had, basically. There were just no options. And it also wasn't only the products. So campaign imagery, in-store displays, they all reflected a very narrow definition of who the beauty products were actually for. You weren't even part of the conversation if you didn't look like the people in the ads. And even if a brand did offer an extended shade range, they were often harder to find in stores. They were stocked inconsistently, or they were framed as like specialty items. They weren't really part of the core line. And people were told that the reason why their colors weren't available for them is because they didn't sell. This drives me absolutely insane. I don't understand the business behind this at all, because how do you know it doesn't sell if you don't make them? How do you know it doesn't? And also, as we'll find out, Fenty proved that wrong. So it's like, no, you're just stupid. Like I can't with the stupidity. How do you know if it doesn't, if you don't make the product, how can you possibly know it won't sell? You're making an assumption and you're an idiot. So I'm coming in hot today. I'm sorry, but this is just like, it's so stupid. And I don't understand why it took Rihanna to fix us. You know what I mean? It took Rihanna to fix the industry's stupidity. So by the 2010s, the frustration around this gap in accessibility was becoming louder, not because people were dealing with it for the first time. People had been dealing with this for a long time, but it was because social media was really starting to gain momentum. The beauty industry on social media was gaining momentum. YouTube specifically, you had people on YouTube who wanted to test new foundations and then were like, can't find my shade. It was becoming a conversation that people were having more and more out in the open. And makeup artists, influencers, and customers were starting to call out brands for launches that failed to meet the needs of large segments of the population, right? Like you're neglecting millions of people. Okay. So I'm like sweating a little bit. So when Rihanna announced that she was launching a beauty brand in 2017, the expectations were quite high, but also skepticism was also high. Celebrity beauty lines had obviously existed before, and many had really struggled to balance their like name star power with actual product credibility, product quality. And for a lot of people, they viewed and still view fairly that a celebrity beauty line from a non makeup artist, I want to be specific about that, a celebrity who is not a makeup artist, they would view their beauty lines as like a cash grab, a kind of half baked idea. They come in at the last minute, slap their name on it, shill it out. Whether that's actually what happens in each brand is a different story, but a lot of people will view it that way and will expect that, especially before 2017. What made Fenty different wasn't just about who was behind it, a global superstar, a gorgeous global superstar, but it was how intentionally the brand positioned itself from day one. And that's where the story really begins. Fenty Beauty was introduced as a joint venture between Rihanna and LVMH, developed under Kendo Brands. So Kendo was LVMH's beauty incubator, and it was already known for incubating and scaling beauty brands within the Sephora ecosystem. So this means that it gave Fenty immediate global distribution and operational support, which is a huge thing to note. They were able to launch knowing that they would be available to people globally, knowing that they would be in Sephora, knowing that they would be able to reach a large audience from day one. When Fenty Beauty officially launched on September 8th, 2017, it entered the market fully formed, fully baked. It was not a test run. It wasn't a capsule collection. It wasn't 4 products. It was a huge, huge launch. The big industry shaker was the launch of their foundation. The brand debuted with 40 foundation shades of the Pro Filter Soft Matte Foundation right out of the gate. And it spanned from very light to very deep skin tones. And it was intentional. It was central to the brand's identity from the very beginning. It wasn't like we're releasing this foundation, more shades are going to come later. It was not because there was a backlash because people were like, you didn't release enough. No, it was the baseline offering. And people went through the roof in a good way, People who could never find their shade before now had options. Like, do you know how important that is to not only have something that can match your skin tone, but to be able to have options? People with this Fenty foundation were able to choose between more than just one shade. And the shade range was spread out extremely evenly, which again is what I was mentioning before. That's what brands often miss. So even if a brand is offering a quote wide shade range, it's not really a range if 75% of them are in the light medium range. That's not a range. You just have a lot of foundation. So a big part of this is that Rihanna was front and center and wanted to be front and center. She was positioned not just as the face of the brand, but she made it very clear that she was the co-owner, she was the creative driver. Even to this day, when she talks about different products under Fenty skin, she talks about her own experiences growing up and how that led her to want to create certain products. Everything comes from a place of her own experience. And she made that very clear from the beginning, from this launch. And in interviews leading up to the launch, she spoke openly about wanting people of all skin tones to feel included when shopping for makeup. She wanted people to have that feeling of not being singled out, not being excluded. So here's a quote from Riri about this decision. She says, quote, I was like, let me see something for a dark-skinned girl. Let me see something for a pale girl. Let me see someone in between. There are so many different shades. There's red undertones, there's green undertones, there's blue undertones, there's pink undertones, there's yellow. You just never know. So you want people to appreciate the product and not feel like, oh, that's cute, but it only looks good on her, end quote. This launch made such a splash, obviously, but it's important to remember that the launch of Fenty Beauty was not just the foundation. The original Fenty Beauty line consisted of 91 products designed for all skin types and tones. So along with the 40 different shades of the foundation, she came out with 30 of their matchstick skin sticks, which were used for contouring, correcting, concealing, and highlighting. 6 of the Kilowatt Freestyle highlighters for face and eyes, and Invisimatte blotting powder and paper, and the very famous Gloss Bomb lip gloss. And it even included dedicated brushes and sponges to apply it all. Basically, it was a complete makeup kit designed to work together from foundation to finish. And it was inspired by Rihanna's own approach to beauty, and she dubbed this the Fenty face. So here's a statement from Rihanna at the time. Quote, the Fenty face was created for women of all skin tones, of all personalities. These steps are key to starting your makeup no matter the look you're going for. This is where the fun begins, end quote. Oh, I love Rihanna. She could sell me anything, but this was true. She came out with the things that you needed for a full face right away. So as I'm sure you can imagine, or maybe you're like me, you remember the response to Fenty Beauty and all of these launches was huge. Beauty editors, makeup artists, consumers, they all flooded social media. There were swatches, there were reviews, side-by-side comparisons. Like I said, I found the bronzer through YouTube reviews. But what really sustained the attention was that the product themselves performed really well. People felt very positively about the products, and they were also accessible at a prestige price point. And a real strategy, I again want to point this out, is that the launch had immediate visibility. Fenty Beauty launched simultaneously online and in Sephora stores worldwide, which meant customers could find their shade in person. And that really matters, especially for deeper skin tones that had historically been understocked or unavailable in store. To be able to go in and swatch and find your shade is so important just in general. And for this particular launch, it really made people feel like they could have that same experience. So here's another quote from Rihanna about the impact of the shade range of this foundation. Quote, "We've had an amazing emotional connection with customers who have never been able to find their shade of foundation before. I mean, women crying at the counters. It's crazy to think about because when I first started creating the brand, it wasn't that deep for me. The first person I saw put makeup on her face was a Black woman, my mom. So when I'm thinking of my customer, I want everybody to feel like they can come and be a part of the Fenty beauty moment." End quote. The foundation was such a hit that it became the best-selling foundation at Sephora in 2018. And the brand was actually the top selling brand in the US prestige market in 2018, just 1 year after its launch. So, very quickly, industry observers and marketers began referring to the brand's impact as the Fenty effect. This is a shorthand for the way its launch pressured other beauty brands to rethink shade inclusivity as a non negotiable standard rather than a marketing add on. When people talk about the Fenty effect, they're not just talking about foundation shades. So they're talking about a permanent shift into what the beauty industry is allowed to get away with. Before Fenty launched in 2017, limited shade ranges were normalized, but Fenty really just changed that overnight. When Fenty launched with 40 foundation shades right out of the gate, it didn't just impress consumers, it reset expectations. 40 became the new baseline. And importantly, undertones were treated with the same seriousness as depth. There wasn't just light, medium, dark. There was thoughtful, intentional coverage across the spectrum. And the industry started to notice. And within 1 or 2 years after Fenty launched, you started to see brands expand their shade range, often very publicly. I have a few examples. CoverGirl had a True Blend Matte Made foundation that entered the market in 2018 with 40 shades. Too Faced expanded their Born This Way foundation range in 2020. Huda Beauty widened its faux filter foundation range in 2021. And Maybelline's Superstay Full Coverage Foundation expanded their shade range in 2022. Inclusivity stopped being a bonus and started to become a requirement. And once that standard changed and once Fenty kind of laid that foundation, pun intended, down, the brands that didn't meet it started to face some real backlash. And it wasn't just someone having a YouTube review saying this is not great. People started to really, really vocalize their frustration with the brand. One of the clearest examples of this came when Tarte released their much anticipated Shape Tape foundation in 2018. They released it with a 15 shade range. 13 of those shades were light skinned options. 10 of them could match my skin. It was abysmal. It was really bad. They only had 2 dark skinned options, and one was medium and one was dark. There was no in between, there was no nuance. And people commented that the last 2 colors looked like they were just added as an afterthought because they didn't want to be called out for the lack of diversity. Obviously, people were really upset. People were creating social posts about how disappointed they were and asked why they couldn't meet this new standard that Fenty had set. And the backlash to this wasn't just chatter on Twitter or YouTube, it actually led to real product changes. After critics and influencers highlighted the limited shade range, Tarte's leadership publicly acknowledged the misstep and pulled the original product off the shelves. In 2019, the brand relaunched the foundation as Face Tape with 50 shades and 5 undertones. They even expanded other complexion lines, adding 40 shade ranges to existing foundations. So these moves showed that companies were listening, and importantly, consumers who were now empowered by the new standard set by Fenty were actually driving industry changes. And along with its new baseline of what people expect from foundations, the Fenty effect also changed how beauty brands marketed themselves. Representation stopped being tokenized. Campaigns became visibly more diverse, not just one deeper skin model strategically placed somewhere, but full campaigns built around range. So Fenty directly confronted traditional beauty standards by prioritizing representation over conventional marketing approaches. They narrowed the beauty ideals that had dominated the industry for decades. Their advertising emphasized real life representation rather than heavily retouched images as well. Their marketing campaigns featured models with diverse backgrounds, ethnicities, body types, disabilities, identities, you name it. And what this approach did is it went beyond surface level diversity to actually embrace authentic inclusion across just multiple dimensions of beauty. Brands were learning very quickly that audiences could tell the difference between genuine inclusion and just checking the box. And consumers then became more powerful in the process. And I think what's important here is that the shift isn't just purely ideological, it was also commercial. Fenty proved that serving customers who had long been overlooked wasn't a risk, it was good business. The demand was already there, the industry just hadn't bothered to meet it. Fenty Beauty positioned itself as accessible luxury through strategic pricing and premium quality, too. So that's really where I think for a celebrity line to be able to have premium quality really is that balance that I was talking about before. Star power, Rihanna, she could sell me anything, but also I want the product to be good. Like at the end of the day, if I'm going to spend $30, $40, I don't want it to be crap. I want it to be good. So she really made a point, or the company, the brand, her and the chemist and everyone that's doing all that work to create the actual product, they're making sure the product has a high quality as well. So their foundation products would retail at $35 compared to competitors like Estee Lauder at $42. This has changed now, obviously. 10 years later, everything is like $1 million. But at the time, they were providing the same amount of luxury in the product, the same quality as more expensive brands as well. So, this affordable luxury approach expanded the customer base while maintaining that prestige brand imagery. The packaging on these are so beautiful. I have the Pro Filter in my hand right now. It's just this beautiful frosted glass foundation bottle. I think the gloss bombs have always been very fun to hold and play with. The blushes are these like really cool octagons. I just think the packaging is beautiful. And this kind of strategy attracted a diverse demographic without compromising perceived value, which I want to point that out because that's what led to brand loyalty from the very beginning. And brand loyalty is really important, especially now as more and more brands are starting to come out. We covered this in Beauty Bulletin last week. Is one of the outlooks for 2026 in the beauty industry is brand loyalty is harder and harder to come by. People will find other brands if they find that they can get similar quality for less price. So building customer loyalty from day one, from your first product, is so challenging and difficult to maintain. But with Fenty, it seems that it's really been working for them. Their revenue growth over their first 5 years shows that. In 2020, they earned $300 million in revenue. 2021, $400 million in revenue. 2022, $500 million in revenue. So they were growing. The brand loyalty was there even as more and more brands started to come out in those years. And at the same time, the Fenty effect also raised the bar in a way that became uncomfortable for some brands. Inclusivity wasn't something you could just launch once and move on from. It required ongoing investment, better testing, better education, better inventory planning. There's layers to inclusivity. It's not just kind of like an afterthought. And even today, when a brand launches a complexion product, the first conversation is still how inclusive is the range? And that question, that reflex that we have as consumers is the legacy of the Fenty effect. After 2017, Fenty Beauty continued to release products in categories that really reinforced their ethos and everything that they wanted to do. Just a couple months after the launch, Fenty introduced their Stunna Lip Paint, a long-wear, highly pigmented liquid lipstick. This was the first of its kind for the brand. They had had just a gloss before this. Then in October of 2018, Fenty started doing seasonal drops. So it had one called the Chill Out winter range, and this included the Kilowatt Foil Palette, which was a highlighter palette with multiple metallic shades, lip and eye crayon sets and loose powders, and Snow Days and Snow Nights lipstick sets. So this just really showed that Fenty was layering creativity and fun without sacrificing the performance because they already had some amazing formulas as the base to these products. In January of 2019, they expanded their core complexion offerings to include the Pro Filter Instant Retouch Concealer. This was launched with 50 shades to align with their foundation undertones, and the Pro Filter Instant Retouch Setting Powder in multiple translucent shades. And if you watched her Super Bowl performance, she used this retouch setting powder in the middle of her halftime show. And the internet went nuts. Amazing marketing, Fenty. Like, well done. And so at this point, her complexion offerings are now covering a whole range. You have contour, you have your concealer, your foundation, your setting powder, your blotting papers. Like, you got everything. Then on July 31st, 2020, she launched her second beauty brand, Fenty Skin, also in partnership with Kendo Brands. So these products were available exclusively on the brand's website. And like Fenty Beauty, Fenty Skin is aimed at inclusivity. And as a result, all the products were tested on all types of skin tones, textures, and types. So here's a quote from Riri about this launch. Quote, "I'm a woman of color and I have a lot of sensitivity in a lot of areas on my face. So I get really picky with products and a lot of times I get scared and cautious. I wanted a product that just worked. More than anything, that was just the most important thing for me. Something that worked for everyone." End quote. Products were also made with clean, vegan, gluten-free, and oil-free formulas and had earth-conscious packaging, including post-consumer recycled materials, refill systems, and eliminating boxes wherever possible. So this brand launched with 3 products: the Total Cleanser Remove It All Cleanser, the Fat Water Pore Refining Toner Serum, I'm obsessed with that name, and the Hydra Visor Invisible Moisturizer Broad Spectrum Sunscreen. And all of these products were under $40. I have never tried any of the Fenty Skin, just side note, but I've heard amazing things about this sunscreen. People really, really enjoy this sunscreen. And many reviewers really appreciated the simple routine of this and keeping it kind of basic, and that they felt the products blended skincare and makeup prep really beautifully. It isn't necessarily like clinical level skincare. There is some fragrance in it, which can irritate some people with skin sensitivity. I know with me, I can't usually use anything with fragrance. But for the most part, I think it's a very accessible, inclusive skincare range, which matches the whole Fenty vibe. So here's another quote from Rihanna. Quote, "I wanted the best ingredients and I didn't want it to cost a lot. I believe that that's what people deserve. They deserve great product, great skin, and it should not be inaccessible." So Fenty Skin has now grown even more. They have more than 3 products now. So similarly to the Fenty Beauty ethos of beauty for all, Fenty Skin kind of sits in that same idea. It might not replace clinical skincare for you. It might not be all the things you need, but it is for everyone. So after coming out of the gate, just changing the makeup world, where does Fenty Beauty stand now? Well, from what I can tell, it stands at a really interesting crossroads. On one hand, its influence, especially on shade inclusivity, is now part of the industry's baseline. It's part of the expectations of every consumer. On the other hand, the business environment for beauty brands has shifted drastically since 2017. Keep in mind that now there are broader competitive and market pressures happening. So beauty as a category is more saturated than it's probably ever been before. And many brands are now offering those wide shade ranges and inclusive marketing, which again is because of the Fenty effect. But on the other hand, Fenty's once disruptive standout position has now become normal. So that's a testament to its impact, but it also means differentiation has become harder to maintain. Basically, it's you come out, you change the game, everyone now adjusts accordingly, and then what do you do? You know? And reports in late 2025 indicate that LVMH is exploring selling its 50% stake in Fenty Beauty. They're starting to refocus on its core luxury and beauty drivers rather than joint ventures. Now, I do want to point out this doesn't mean the brand failed or that it's failing. It just, brands want to sell off things for many reasons. The brand still has strong name recognition, global distribution, that brand loyalty that I talked about. But what it does show is that the beauty landscape has really matured, and how even these iconic disruptors have to continue growing with the times and finding new ways, maybe to not disrupt, but finding new ways to stay relevant. So, in other words, I don't think Fenty is going to go anywhere anytime soon. It's entering its new chapter in a beauty market that looks very different than the one it reshaped in 2017. All right, it's time for the rabbit hole of the week, my favorite segment. If you are new here, the rabbit hole of the week is always something that happens when I am doing my research. I fall down some kind of rabbit hole. I never know what it's going to be. It just kind of happens. And I always want to share it because I find rabbit holes to be so fun. And then if you want to go on your own rabbit hole, I've given you the keys. So this week's rabbit hole is about kendo. Fenty obviously didn't come out of nowhere. There was a little backstage magic, and that backstage magic is kendo brands. So I mentioned that kendo is a beauty incubator, and it's specifically the beauty incubator for LVMH. Now, let me explain a little bit more what that means. So they don't just slap a celebrity name on a product and then say, that's our investment. We found this product. We can get it for cheap. Put your name on it. We'll invest in it. Hope for the best. Instead, what they do is they develop, design, and scale brands with a real infrastructure. So they have product labs where they design the products. They have marketing distribution. They have retail strategy, usually with specific retailers. And in this case, they have the global Sephora ecosystem that they work with, which helps launch the brands. They're able to create brands, push them through, distribute them, grow them, all that stuff. It's very, from what I can tell, I'm not an expert on this at all. This was part of the rabbit hole, was me trying to figure out what this means. But from what I can tell, they're very, very involved. It's like a very intricate and organized process. And it's not, like I said, like a slap and dash kind of thing. They are involved at every level of the process. Kendo was founded in 2010 by David Solutano, who had been deep in beauty retail leadership. So he at one time was the CEO of Sephora Americas. So he knows this stuff, basically. The name Kendo is actually a playful take on the phrase can do, which really sums up their approach. They take bold, creative ideas and turn them into real market-shaking beauty brands. By 2014, Kendo became fully part of LVMH's perfumes and cosmetics group, giving it additional resources, global distribution, and let's be honest, some of the best beauty retail real estate in the world. So not only were they powerful on their own, but when they joined LVMH, they got all of that backing on top of that as well. So now Kendo has launched or helped scale some pretty major brands. So Fenty Beauty, of course, and Fenty Skin. They also helped launch or scale Marc Jacobs Beauty, Ole Henriksen, Bite Beauty, and KVD Beauty, which was sold in 2025. So basically, from what I can tell, Kendo is this like engine that takes a bold creative idea, I don't know, let's say like 40 shades in a foundation, and builds it into an actual global brand. And without that incubator model, industry relationships, product labs, distribution muscle, all that, Fenty might have looked very different at launch if it didn't have that kind of backing of Kendo. Maybe it was a little bit more boutique. Maybe there wasn't that many foundation shades. I don't know. Who knows what it would have been? But it's just kind of wild when you think about it. Kendo itself is not really a household name. Most consumers probably don't know it exists, but it's literally shaping what we see on shelves and how brands go global. Isn't that wild? So it really helps support brands. And in this case with Fenty Beauty, it combined the celebrity, the vision, the solid R&D, and a really impressive infrastructure to create what I think is a bar for celebrity products. And not just celebrity makeup products in general. I think a lot of credit needs to be given to Kendo, and obviously LVMH and everyone that invested in this. When I was going down this rabbit hole, I was like, more people need to know who Kendo brands are because this is just an impressive feat for them. So yeah, next time you're thinking about how Fenty just like nailed it with the timing and the inclusivity and the cultural buzz, just remember there was a whole crew behind the scenes making sure Rihanna's vision wasn't just revolutionary, but that it actually worked, was high quality, and people could access it in the real world. All right, we are on to our iconic product section. We did talk about most of these, but I want to go through them. So the iconic product number one, obviously the Pro Filter Soft Matte Long Wear Foundation. It launched with the 40 shades, as you know, but it has now been expanded to 52 shades. And just last year, Time named this foundation one of the best inventions of the past 25 years for its industry impact. Mind you, this was the only beauty product on the list. That is insane. That is insane. Do you know how many beauty products have come out in the past 25 years? And that's good for you. Good. Whoever the chemist is behind this, let's give them a shout out. Come to the front if you helped create this foundation. Come to the front of the class and let's all praise you here because that's impressive. All right, the other iconic product that came out right out of the gate, the Gloss Bomb Universal Lip Luminizer. I'm actually wearing it right now. This is one of Fenty's most beloved lip products. It's known for its high shine, non-sticky feel, which I can attest, and universally flattering shades. I'm currently wearing Hot Chocolate, and I love it. It is beautiful. Other iconic product, I mentioned this one before, the Stunna Lip Paint. This was a bold, universally flattering red that helped make lips feel inclusive and confident. I also want to say, I remember when they came out with the Poutsicle hydrating lip stain. They were like fun, bright colors. I think it came out in the summer. I don't remember what year. It was a summer. And I remember that going super viral and I wanted to try it and it was never in stock when I went to Sephora. So I'm going to throw that on here as well because I feel like if it was impossible to get, iconic. Also iconic, the Kilowatt Freestyle Highlighter. So people love these highlighters for its radiant glow without being glittery. I'll show you the packaging here. Again, it's like that fun little octagon. It's huge, by the way. Like this is the same size as their bronzers. It has 8 grams of product. Like that's a lot of product. People found that it was very buildable for every skin tone. If you were someone who wanted like more highlight, you could. And this particular shade, this is the shade Trophy Wife. This is straight up gold. It's gorgeous. Now, I don't think I can wear this as a highlighter. It's a little too gold for me, but I'm going to use it in my video as an eyeshadow. So I think that's going to be a beautiful eyeshadow. I think that's going to be a nice pop. Another iconic product, this one came out in the original launch, was the Match Stick. So this was a creamy stick product that could be used for contour, for highlight, for concealing. That's how kind of wide the range was. So I ended up getting one of them in more of a contour shade. So this is how I'll be using it. I have it in the shade Amber, and it's this really beautiful, cool toned contour. And again, you could find it in a bunch of different shades and use it a multitasking stick, which we love. We love to see. Also on their iconic product list is the Pro Filter Instant Retouch Concealer and Setting Powder. So like I said, this really completed their complexion story. And the concealer was also in that broad shade range like the foundation. And the setting powder really helped to blur and reduce shine. So people enjoyed using all of those together. And one that came out a little bit later, and one that I've heard a lot about actually from YouTube reviewers, is their Eavesdrop. So there's the Eavesdrop Blurring Skin Tint, which came out first. This is more of a liquid. It's a skin tint, so it's a liquid, more of a runnier formula than a foundation. It's more skin-like. It has a lighter coverage option. It's a little more natural. So the Pro Filter foundation is more of a soft matte finish. And the Eavesdrop Skin Tint is more of a natural, barely there skin-like finish. So it really showed that the brand can do both. It can do more of a matte finish and it can do a skin-like, no makeup finish. And people really enjoyed the skin tint enough that they ended up coming out with a skin tint stick, which I bought because I really wanted to do a side-by-side of the skin tint stick versus the Pro Filter foundation. So I'm going to be doing that. I've never used either. I'm very excited. But this is the stick foundation that translates those original Eavesdrop skin tint into a creamy, easy to apply stick formula. Let's get into some fun facts. So I mentioned before that Fenty Beauty was the top selling brand in the US prestige beauty market 1 year after the launch. There's a few other things I wanted to note as well. In 2019, Fenty Beauty was actually named Brand of the Year at the WWD Beauty Inc. Awards. And they also won an award for services to diversity at the 2018 Vogue Beauty Awards. Good for them. And actually just announced in May of last year, Fenty Beauty and Fenty Skin are the latest partners of the WNBA team, the New York Liberty. I'll end this episode with a quote from our bad gal, Rihanna. What began as a concept, a desire really, for every person to feel truly represented and not only included but celebrated, has now become bigger than I ever imagined. So those were the Chronicles of Fenty. Let me know what you think of the brand. Do you remember them coming out in 2017? Do you remember the beautiful chaos they caused? Have you tried anything? Are you interested in trying anything? Let me know. Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for tuning in, and feel free to share any of the brands that you want to hear about on this podcast. I love when people send me suggestions. I obviously listen, so hit me up. Let me know. And don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, all that good stuff. It really does help the podcast reach more people. And feel free to share it as well. If anyone who you think might be interested, I feel like this is a great podcast to fold your laundry to. So I appreciate you being here, and I will see you next time on the Cosmetic Chronicles.